Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for the support, kind messages, the emails, all the things that you've sent my way, sent the show's way. Truly appreciate it. Really look forward to hearing more of those as well. I just can't say enough about how much I'm grateful for all of the interactions I get with you guys as listeners and how much value you get out of these episodes. And you're definitely going to get value out of this one as well, as we talk about ball movement, we talk about offense, and specifically putting those together, getting the ball moving on offense. Those of you listening, you know how important it is, especially now with the way that basketball is played, to have good ball movement, to make sure that your guys are in space and putting themselves in position to be successful. So that's what we're going to get into today, talking about offense, talking about ball movement, and all the good stuff that allows more points to get up on the scoreboard. So very happy to be joined today by the head boys basketball coach at Venice High out in Florida. Very happy to be joined today by Coach Luke Davis. Coach, appreciate you being able to come on here and share some of your insight with us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Always happy for an opportunity to talk about basketball. So
Love it, Coach. Very happy to have you on. And let's start with you, and let's start with your basketball and your coaching journey. Talk us through where this game of basketball has taken you and ultimately how you ended up where you are right now at Venice.
yeah, so I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. So I grew up playing basketball there, grew up playing all sports, and just fell in love with basketball. I was always tall, so it was like, why aren't you playing basketball? And so parents put me in basketball, and around like fifth or sixth grade, I fell in love with it. It was something that I could, go outside and work on my own, and it wasn't like I needed a field or equipment, or it was just like ball and basket, and then let me try all these things out. And so that's kind of how I got started with it. I obviously started playing from there, and I went and played for a Hall of Fame coach in Missouri named Mark Scanlon, and he had over 600 wins by the time I graduated from Archbishop O'Hara High School in Kansas City. And so he kind of laid the foundation for me, really put the thought into my head, like, hey, maybe I do want to be a teacher and a coach. So I think when I was around like middle school or sixth grade or something, we used to track my height in the closet, right? Like make a mark on the wall, and somehow like I would mark the heights, and then somehow I got carried away. I started putting goals and like goal heights. And I'm like, all right, 6'7", 6'8", like marking it in my room. And obviously that never happened. I'm like 6'4". So, but I also put be a head basketball coach and be a college basketball coach, I think when I was like, I don't know, 11 or 12. So it's always like been in my mind. It's always been what I wanted to do. And I just really haven't like had a question in my mind that like that's what I wanted to do with my life. So when I played in high school, I did a year of NAIA basketball after high school, and then I started coaching high school my last 2 years of college. And so that's really where I got that start of coaching. I had a really good, obviously, like role model, like I said, my high school coach, and he kind of gave things to me as a player's perspective. And then I got with a guy named Landon Cornish, who's one of the best coaches I've ever been around. He was in Springfield, Missouri, Parkview High School. A lot of history there, a lot of really good basketball there. And he hires me on as the varsity assistant and freshman coach for 2 years. So I actually sent out an email to all the area schools saying, hey, I'm just a student at Missouri State. I'm trying to get into coaching, whatever. Went to bed that night, like didn't think anything of it. And I woke up the next day with a text from him saying, hey, can you come by practice? And so I kind of jumped into it that way. And I just remember going through the first season and really getting close with those varsity guys. And we ended up losing in districts and really like close game. And just like seeing those seniors, I hadn't been around that moment since I was in high school myself. And just, that realization where like it's done, I'm, done playing basketball, it's over, hits them. And, witnessing that like from the outside perspective, I just went home that night and I'm like, this is what I want to do. Like this, it just gets me fired up. Like it's just where I want to be is in the gym, working with kids that like want to get better, want to better themselves. So, I graduated from college, with an education degree, and then I had some family in Florida, and I kind of just wanted to, get to a little bit bigger scene, bigger area. And so I made the move down to basically Sarasota is where I live. And I did 1 year as a JV coach at Northport High School. Um, was lucky to have been brought on there by Ryan Power. He's an awesome coach. Another young guy, he's in his 30s, and he's over at Jensen Beach High School now on the other east coast of Florida. But he brought me on and hired me on as a JV coach. And then I did that for 1 year and was fortunate enough to be hired as the head coach at Venice High School. And I'm going into my third season now at Venice High School and sixth overall coaching high school basketball. So it's gone by quick, but I wouldn't trade it. We'll just keep rolling. So
I'm just curious, Coach, because now that you're on year three,
yeah.
now that you're on year three, what has stayed the same, consistent for your 3 years? And are there any things that you learned and changed and kind of got rid of and scrapped from year one now to year three that you're on right now?
Yeah, definitely making that jump from JV to varsity was huge. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in junior varsity games, like you can get away with playing zone the whole game. You can get away with just being the more athletic and faster team. Those kids, their IQs aren't as high, and you don't really have the same amount of preparation as varsity. So that was definitely a learning curve. I had a really good team my first year. I was fortunate enough, and they made things a little easier on me, but it was definitely a learning curve. The game was a little bit faster, and you just kind of have to put way more preparation into it and just be thinking and figuring things out as the game goes on. And where JV, I feel like is more like, hey, this is our game plan, this is what we're good at. We're going to roll the ball out and try to execute that to the max. So
Yeah,
definitely, a little more detail going into the varsity level.
fair enough, for sure. Let's start, Coach, with something I know you're passionate about, which is the concept of promoting aggressiveness in practice. So,
Mm,
talk us through how you can create an environment in practice that's aggressive and competitive, but also at the same time not being something that's like out of control and not productive. How do you kind of balance the two so that you make sure it's hitting that line of like perfect, and I mean we're never perfect, but you get the idea of about being that perfect as close as you can level of aggressiveness and competitiveness.
yeah, we like to do a lot of games within drills and kind of do team versus team. And one thing that my assistant Rick does really well is he'll pick two guys and they have no clue like what game we're doing. And he just says, okay, these two guys, you guys pick teams. And it could be a rebounding drill, it could be a shooting drill, it could be sprints, and so it's kind of interesting to see like who they want next to them, who do they want going to like war with them before they even know what, is happening. So we like to do a lot of games where it's team versus team and try to promote that competitiveness. Obviously, some conditioning is involved for the losing team. Um, but yeah, so whether it's a shooting drill, a rebounding drill, um, losing team has some sort of conditioning. And then I think, stressing that to your guys
Mm.
and everything that you do in practice, it should also translate to games. So if you want them to, compete on the defensive level, then you really need to get after it in practice and promote that to them. So just like trying to create those habits in practice and, things like not hesitating to hit the ground on a loose ball, sprinting to help. We just try to stress competing in every aspect of the game. Like, are you going hard in warmups? Are you the most prepared? Have you gone over the scouting report? Be the best that you can be. Whatever's going to give you like the best edge, competitively. So um, conflicts are going to happen, obviously.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's a good thing because you might have two guys that maybe have a little beef with each other. And I would much rather than work that out in practice where it's a controlled environment than, we're in a game and they're going at it with each other in a timeout. So I think, trying to promote that competitive environment, it helps you see like how are these guys going to react in these situations and kind of prepare you as a coach. You can kind of take some mental notes sometimes or just see how what guys are doing in those certain situations. And hey, like I can trust this guy at the end of the game. Or, if we're getting trapped, like this guy's going to lose his mind, like he can't be in. So just things like that. Try to get the most out of practices and just be really competitive.
Yeah, you bring up a point that I wholeheartedly agree with about practices like being messy and sometimes there's some conflict, sometimes there's a little bit of aggressiveness, sometimes there's a little bit of tension, but I think that as you mentioned, right, that's what you want your practices to be. You want to work out those things through
Mhm,
your practice so they don't spill over in the game. So I think for
for sure.
coaches listening, if your practices get a little bit chippy or they get a little bit heated, so to speak, within reason, I think all of that's fine because they learn how to work through it within a game setting. And I think as long
Hmm.
as as a coach, you kind of make sure that that practice ends with everybody building each other up and everybody holding their head up high, I
Yes.
think that's okay. And it sounds like for you, as you kind of talked about, like it's all right if it gets a little tense here and there because you know that that sort of, healthy conflict is going to lead to hopefully, conflict resolution and like you said, not spilling over in a game situation.
It's funny if you have two guys that are going at it in practice and gets too far or whatever, it gets chippy, somebody pushes somebody. They hate it so much, and you make them shake hands and hug each other. It's pretty funny, but they and then afterwards they're like, "All right, this whole thing was dumb." So I've had that
Uh-huh.
happen a few times, and they're like, "Hug? What? What do you mean hug?" I'm like, "Yeah, go hug
Yeah.
him." So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, that's hilarious. No, I tell my girls too that, the people that you care the most about, like your best friends on the team, are the ones that you should push the hardest. So it's always fun when I see a couple
yeah,
girls who I know are best friends off the court and they're just, getting after each other during
yep,
drills or during practice or in, a small-sided game or something. And you would think as an outsider that these two girls couldn't stand each other, and then practice ends and they're like laughing and like hugging and
yeah,
like shaking
yeah,
hands. Like that's like the best feeling ever to me.
uh-huh, for sure.
So moving to the idea, coach, of getting the ball moving on offense, let's start with what is it that you like to run on offense and talk us through what you like to run and how important it is to get the ball moving for you to be successful offensively.
Yeah, so my high school coach was the same way, but I'm a big believer in balance, and I don't like to be a one-dimensional team. I like to, try to have multiple ways, or try to, sorry, make teams beat you in multiple different ways. Like, don't be, so easy to kind of pin down what you're doing. So, I offensively, obviously it's going to depend on your personnel, um, and what kind of players you have, but um, we like to do a couple different motion offenses, and just keep the ball moving and keep your guys moving and promote that movement and spacing. And then, letting them get to a point where, hey, like here's the script, but I'm going to let you guys play it a little bit. So, um, definitely, I like to run a couple motion offenses. We'll have two or three at a time, and then, you have sets that you throw in there. So, I'm not a big believer in just run set, set, set. We try to um, isolate different actions that we have in our motions or our sets and teach the guys how to play, and also teach the guys how to defend it too, because
Hmm.
we'll look at what teams are going to do to us, but just trying to get them to say like, hey, obviously, like they're not going to double the screen every time or hedge it, like you're going to have to figure it out on your own in a game. So we're going to look at different things. They're going to try to take this away, they're going to try to take the dribble handoff away, like you're going to have to skip, and just things like that. So try to get them to just play and not, more reacting within limits versus just trying to think every second and try to, pre-plan every single second of the game. It's just not going to happen. So, um, we really like to keep things moving, and kind of give them that controlled chaos. It depends on who you have, and if you have old guys that you trust and things like that, then that's
Right.
good. But um, nothing's more frustrating when the ball sticks in the guy's hands. So we just don't want anybody who's one dimensional. Anybody can go out there and pass the ball. Um, but with our motion offenses, you're trying to get your best players an advantage. And I think certain offenses are important for certain times of the game. So you're coming out of a quarter, out of a timeout and out of bounds play. That's when you really, need a good set. You want to get three or something like that. But as far as motion goes and how we create that spacing, we want to get our best players an advantage. And so whether if we have a guy who's really good at coming off screens and getting downhill, it's okay. Let's spread the floor. Let's set him a high ball screen and let him, kind of work and attack. I've had last year where it was more, we didn't have that IQ, so to speak. So we kind of had to be a little bit more structured. And it was like, okay, we're going to run this set. If they, they play defense this way, we're going to counter it this way. You're going to slip the screen and cut back door and things like that. So just depends on, I think, what type of team you have and what type of players you have, how high their IQ is, and how much you trust them too. So, yeah.
So you talked about, a lot of players' decision making in your answer. So I'm curious about how do you kind of build your players like basketball IQ and being able to read and understand what it is that's happening on the court? How do you kind of work that into whether it's like your practice plan, your game planning, what kind of goes into like building your players' decision making so that they know what they should be looking for offensively?
Yeah, so two things that are great that, I didn't even have when I was in high school, and that wasn't that long ago, but we're looking at, the breakdown stats wise of every single game. And I'm not a huge statistics guy. Like everything else, I think you have to have a balance of everything, but I definitely think it's an advantage and something you can learn from. And, if you have a guy that's out there playing and he feels like he's playing really well, and you're looking at the stat sheet and it's like it's minus 14 when you're on the floor, and so things aren't always the way that you see, but you go back and watch the game on film, and the players get to see it from that perspective, and then you look at the stat sheet, and then we go to practice and we're like, okay, look, you're bad at this, or we're not. I don't want to say you're bad at this, but you're not being successful at this right now. And
Yeah.
so how can we fix that? Here's what keeps happening. Let's try to simulate it in practice and come up with a solution.
Yeah, and how are they able to respond to that level of like, I don't say criticism, but like I guess guidance or kind of that feedback, or has that been something that's been
Yeah.
successful? How do those conversations tend to go?
I I mean, the film doesn't lie, So
Yeah.
when you show somebody, it's like, you think that you're doing something good here, but really, like, this is why we keep telling you to do something else. So I think um, that's a huge advantage, having that film and showing them. It's like, hey, I'm not attacking you. I just want you to see it from a different perspective. Because a lot of times, as coaches, like, we get wrapped up in the game too, and I go back and watch film and I'm like, oh my God, I look like an idiot right there. Like, so it's really helpful to see that other perspective. Um, and so different guys react to criticism differently. Some kids you can get after, and some guys, and it has to be a one-on-one where you're kind of breaking down film with each other. And that's kind of something I learned too. We used to do film sessions, whole team, and you might call a guy out in front of the whole team, and you may not really be aware of how he takes that or not. And so one thing that I've tried to, start integrating is doing small groups of film, keeping like similar positions together. And then that way it doesn't feel like they're being kind of called out in front of the entire team. So if it's like, your group of guards, 2, 3 guards at a time, and you're kind of dissecting everything, I think they tend to take that criticism a lot better than when it's in front of the team, or if you're stopping practice and saying, getting after somebody. So
Yeah, and I imagine also some of that maybe has to come down to knowing like your guys and knowing your personnel and everything like that. There's probably like a little bit of trial and error of knowing like what sort of, film sessions or the way that you teach or the way that you approach conversations with guys or groups of guys. It probably will vary maybe slightly
yep,
from group to group or player to player. I know I've had situations like that where, some whole group stuff works really well, but others it's like, might need to, break this up or chunk this up a little bit because it
yes,
works better for
yeah,
this group, so to speak.
for sure.
What do you do, coach, intentionally, I suppose, to teach ball movement in practice? Are there certain drills or things that you like to work on to really get the ball moving and kind of teach that concept to your guys about making sure that the ball keeps moving and not sticking in one place?
Yeah, so we try to drill our guys verbally with, repetitive phrases that we just kind of want to stick in their heads. And so one thing I saw, I can't remember where I got it, but 0 second decisions is something that we use like every day. And we'll run drills where we'll simulate some offense that we're running, and we really stress, hey, you really need to know what you're doing with the ball before you catch in this situation. And so 0 second
Hmm.
decisions, obviously you can't make a decision in 0 seconds. You already have to know what you're doing. So we really stress 0 second decisions. Like you're catching the ball and you're either in triple threat, pump faking, jab stepping, you're passing the ball, you're ripping and going through on a dribble to the rim, or you're catching and shooting. And I think if everybody has that mentality, I'm going to make a 0 second decision. I'm going to make a 0 second decision. The ball moves a lot faster and a lot more efficiently too. If you have a guy that's hesitating to let the ball leave his hands, like that's an issue. So just promoting trust and getting like the guys to not hesitate to find the open teammate is really, really important. Like if you have a guy who catches the ball in the wing and he kind of has someone closing out on him, but he has a teammate wide open in the corner and he wants to take the shot versus passing to his teammate, the old give up a good shot for a great shot. If he's hesitating in that situation, like that's an issue. And so we just really try to get them to understand, like, hey, we want to trust each other. We want to put each other in the best situation to be successful. And if you're hesitating to make that pass, then clearly, you might have some things to you that are more important than team success. So we try to, kick that in the butt, so to speak, and take care of that early and practices at the beginning of the season. But it drives me nuts when the ball sticks and when guys are hesitating because it just screams, it's a foreign body language and it just screams that like I don't trust these guys. I think I can do it all myself. But once you kind of get them to gain that trust and be around their teammates is huge. I think doing things that are team building activities. Some coaches may disagree, but when guys are friends, I think there's just that level of chemistry that you can't really achieve just from a practice. And so, just trying to encourage those guys to do stuff together, but we'll also, do things as a team. We've had beach days in the past. We go to college basketball games, meals before games and things like that. So it's not all basketball related, but I think, just having that trust in each other is going to help huge.
So, do your guys, when they come in, is there kind of this tendency, I guess, where they don't trust one another? Is it something that you have to explicitly kind of like put in or teach or kind of put them in situations where they have to learn to trust one another? I was curious about your thoughts on it because it kind of sounds like your guys are a little bit hesitant. Maybe they don't know each other right away, and so they got to like have that kind of built in culture wise off the court, on the court to where they kind of learn to trust each other. Is that something that is important?
It's definitely important. I think I wouldn't say I have like a huge issue with it, probably just as
Mm-hmm.
much as any other coach in the country. But the way that we kind of work down here is we have a JV and varsity, and JV's pretty much for just freshmen and sophomores. And so you'll have guys that play JV for 2 years, and when they're coming up to varsity, they're just not used to the speed of the game. They're not used to moving the ball as much and kind of being unselfish. Where it's JV, if you're that guy, you can go get a bucket, then you're going to go get a bucket. So just kind of breaking bad habits sometimes. It's also Florida, so a lot of people move in, a lot of people move out. You have new guys that come from, like I have a kid from Poland who literally moved here from Poland 2 years ago. Kids from all over the country, Washington State, Texas, whatever. So you kind of get thrown a guy here and there, and that's a junior, 15 years old already, 16 years old already. And so trying to change the way that a teenager thinks is really difficult. Um,
Yeah.
and so just trying to get them to buy in and just be comfortable with the process.
One of the things to kind of follow up over I was thinking about is you're kind of talking about, practice planning and the way they kind of build things is kind of follow coach about that, just the overall concept of passing. It's such an underrated or underappreciated or both, kind of art or skill. And you and I both know how crucial it is to good ball movement to be able to get those passes right on the money, right where they need to be. So in your experience, what are the things that you're either teaching or refining or talking to your guys about making good passes, getting your guys in good position to receive passes? What sort of teaching points go into making sure that crucial part of the game is being executed the right way?
Well, first off, we get in the weight room. So in the preseason and postseason. So since August, the I think it was the second week of school, so like August 15th or something. We lifted 4 days a week until um last week, before last week. So you can't expect kids to do things that they physically can't do. So if I'm asking somebody to throw a cross court pass and they physically can't do it, then that's not their problem. They're just not strong enough. So first off, we try to get these guys in the weight room and get them strong enough to do the things that we're asking them. Second, I think high school players don't really realize that the room for error is so low in the high school game. They watch NBA and how spread out the floor is and things like that. And I think that, in a high school game, you catch the ball at, your waist and you're bringing it up to shoot versus catching at your chest and shooting. Like that could be the difference in making a shot or not, or, winning a game or not if you're trying to, if you need a bucket at the end of the game or something like that. So, really stressing those. I mean, we do passing drills probably just like everybody else does. And just stressing eye contact and saying the name of the guy you're passing to. Guy that catches the ball is saying the name of the guy who's passing to him. So those two things are really emphasized. Um, touches, positive touches are really emphasized. I just think when you're more connected, the ball just moves a little bit easier. So um, getting the ball to those guys in their shooter's pocket. We work on a lot of driving kick, and it's like rip, go baseline, jump stop, and as you're driving, the shooter's sliding from the corner to the wing, and he's not leaving his shooter stance. He's showing you where he wants the ball, and
Mm-hmm.
those are things that we simulate and practice, and that's what we do in a game. So we teach it like get into the rim, jump stop, shooters. You're moving from the wing to the corner, or top of the key to the wing, or whatever, but you're not coming out of your shooter stance. And so it just goes back to kind of trying to drill those things every day in practice and trying to make it a habit of it to where when they step on the basketball court, no matter if they're playing a game for us or practice for us or they're at the YMCA hooping, like they're practicing those good habits and it's part of their game now. So, um, yeah.
Is it something, coach, that like you feel that you have to be explicitly, you know, drilling or making a part of your practice plan, or even these concepts of passing? How much of it is kind of built into other things that you're working on at the same time? Because I'm always curious about coaches who, kind of balance that. Like, do I want to focus on a specific skill and just really hone in on this one skill and nothing else versus, hey, let's work on this skill within the context of these other, 4 and 5 other skills that you might be working on because it's more game like? How do you kind of balance, kind of the breakdown of a specific skill versus like making it game like and incorporating, one skill with a bunch of others as well?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a lot like teaching. And you kind of I teach science, right? So it's a lot of
Hmm.
vocabulary, and you want to introduce the vocabulary early. Then you want to, maybe go into your PowerPoint. It's scaffolded. So we kind of try to do the same thing, and I think you have to kind of go through phases as the season goes because the first day of practice for us does not look like the last day of practice for us, and it's
Hmm.
everybody across the country is probably the same way. And at the beginning of the season, you're kind of drilling skills. Maybe guys that play other sports are kind of trying to get them up to speed, get guys connected with each other, and just get back in the gym and get the feel back for the ball. But 2 months into the season, like we don't need to spend 30 minutes on passing. So I think it also kind of goes back to what kind of team you have and what your needs are. And if that's a huge problem for you and you guys are turning the ball over a lot, you start playing games, and that's something you need to address and fix, then you can't really ignore it. So I think once you start playing games, certain things take precedent. Whatever you're struggling with, if you are struggling with anything, that kind of is like, okay, this is what we need to work on to start practice every day for the next 2 weeks. But I like to kind of get back to basics for the first 2, 3 weeks of practice and really just drill the fundamentals. And some of these guys are, 17, 18 years old, and we're doing mic and drill and shooting free throws and jump stops and things like that, just to get those habits built up to where in the game, it's just muscle memory. So,
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Sometimes, you get away from those drills, like you said, like the mic and drill. Sometimes you get away from
mhm,
those drills sometimes because they, like I got all these other things to work on and, this, that, or whatever. And then you don't do those sort of drills. And then next thing you know, you have your guys or girls, blowing these layups right at the rim. You're like, man, we probably should have done,
Yeah.
Mike and drill at some point, but you just kind of got
Right.
away with it because you're thinking about all this other stuff. But,
Yep.
if they don't practice, even just finishing at the rim or finishing things like on a Mike and drill, it's like, well, we don't, break down and give specific time to work on these fundamental skills. It's like, in a game, I don't know what
Yeah.
they might not be ready when the game comes, and so it's such a balancing act. And like you said, right, your practice planning is very like fluid in terms of like looking at what your team needs to work on, what your team needs to do. And it
Mhm.
sounds to me, coach, that like you're very kind of like open-minded or trying to be very responsive to what your team needs and making
For
practice
sure.
plans based on that.
I probably spent too much time on X or Twitter, but I see everybody calls it taking your vitamins or whatever. Take your vitamins, and there's videos of all these NBA guys and college guys doing mic and drill and shooting free throws and things like that. And I'm like, you always have to be working on your game. That's what I try to tell our guys. And um, if it's it's not too good for them, then if LeBron's
Mhm.
doing it, why can't you do it? So try to guilt them a little bit. But I love the taking your vitamins things. We try to use that too. So.
Yeah, no, no, that's awesome. I love that phrase. We all know, Coach, how important it is if we're going to get the ball moving on offense. That off-ball movement is super important, and I think it's
Mhm.
with a lot of the people I talk to, and even guests I've had on here, really stress how difficult it is, and how much effort kind of goes into coaching players to move without the ball. So,
Mhm.
talk us through what it is that you talk to, or how you work with your guys to really build up their off-ball movement.
Yeah, so one of the things that we say all the time, or at least I do, is sense of urgency. Have a sense of urgency. So, it kind of goes back to nothing drives me more crazy when the ball sticks or somebody just seems like they're going at their speed and everybody else is, not benefiting from that. So I think there are just some guys who get it, right? And
Hmm.
guys and girls included. Like just some basketball players who just understand at an early age, oh, the lane's open, I'm going to cut, and so, or I'm double team, somebody's open. And some guys take a little longer to figure that out. And so, some kids you don't need to say a word to. If, your guy's denying you to half court, stop going even further and, cut to the rim. And some guys will just automatically pick it up. So I think kind of positive reinforcement, going back to the teaching, when you're trying to change behavior, I went to school for special education, so it was drilled in my mind. But when you're trying to, change behavior, you want to let that person or student or player or whoever let them know that what they're doing is considered, not a good behavior. But you also want to give them alternatives to that behavior because it's happening for a reason. So, why am I doing this? Okay, this could be why. Maybe you just don't understand. Here's what we're going to do instead. And then when they actually do that, you positively reinforce it. So, if a guy's getting double teamed and he keeps leaving his feet to throw the ball across the court, um, stopping practice right there and say, next time, throw it off his leg, reverse pivot, or retreat dribble. Like we're going to try one of those three things. And when they get in that situation, if they do it, then you stop practice right there and say, it's exactly what I wanted you to do. Great job changing that behavior. So I think it kind of goes back to that. But like I said, you just have some guys who they get in the gym and they just understand like the basket's open, I'm just going to cut. And those guys make your life a lot easier sometimes. So it'd be nice to have a team full of them. But yeah, I think it's specific player to player. But having that sense of urgency and drilling that in, have a sense of urgency. We talk about it all the time and attention to detail, ATD. We talk about that all the time. So just kind of drilling that into their minds and getting them to buy in and understand that.
So your players, is it a situation where they need to kind of be reminded or kind of be, taught about that sense of urgency? Is that something that you got to like bring out of guys? Is that something that like guys already have in it and you're kind of refining it? I'm just kind of curious about
Mhm.
where do you as a coach kind of make sure that their, level of urgency on the court is where you want it to be?
Right. So I think I like to play fast, but if you hear a coach
Hmm.
say they like to play fast, you think of, a lot of dribbling and a lot of, maybe dribble drive or whatever. But if you don't have the personnel for that, you have to move the ball fast. You have to pass the ball fast. So um, we try to because I don't have guys who are the fastest on the court. Um, we have size, we have shooters, but we're not, going out there and pressing you 94 feet. So I think getting them to understand like what does this, having a sense of urgency mean? Okay, that doesn't mean coach wants me to freak out and throw the ball across the court, but
Mm.
have a sense of urgency, like you're the first to the floor when the balls, loose balls and things like that. And it just goes back to explaining to them because I think a lot of times, and it happened to me even when I was playing, like a coach would say something and they'd be like, "Do you understand? You know what I'm saying?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, sure." And then it would be revisited, And so
Yeah.
I think explaining that and just going through everything because you'll be in a timeout sometimes, and you're like, exactly where you're supposed to go, right? And they're like, yeah, and then they go the complete opposite way. And so, just like taking the time to explain maybe what you mean, um, and just trying to understand they can't read your mind all the time. So, when I say sense of urgency, it's situational. It'll like, if you're down 10 with 2 minutes left, like you probably shouldn't just be walking the ball up the floor. Like have a sense of urgency. I want you to speed dribble. We want to get into our set that we're trying to run and push the pace a little bit. So just being really specific about what you're asking them to do and kind of break down that barrier and getting everybody on the same page.
Well, I think and that speaks to kind of a point, coach, of like the way that you speak or the way that your language is, right? I think sometimes it's easy as coaches to speak in generalities or to say a term or phrase that
Mm-hmm.
like we know what it means or in our mind we have an idea about what that phrase means to us, but unless it's like demonstrated to our players as to like this is what urgency means, the best they're going to be able to do is kind of guess or assume or go off their own definition. And then if they do something and we don't agree with it and it's like we'll get
Yeah.
frustrated, but it's like we never explained to them what that meant, and so
Mm-hmm.
there could be a lot of disconnect. And I think you kind of mentioned that about being a science teacher. You talk about vocab and everything like that. Like it seems that something that you really like to do then is kind of really make sure that things like terminology are well defined and there's no like confusion necessarily about like what those words mean when they come out of your mouth.
It's funny you kind of bring that up. My first year, we were going into like our first scrimmage. You're allowed two preseason scrimmages. So
Hmm.
before I had an idea, I'm like, let's give these guys a quiz. So I wrote down all these like terminology or whatever that we'd been using, and it was amazing because half of them didn't know, what half of it meant. And it's like I've been saying this for 2 weeks, and you guys don't know, what it means. And you can't be mad at them. It's your own fault for not making sure they have that background knowledge going into that. So, yeah, I found out very quickly. It's like, no, I do need to make sure that they understand what I mean, and the quiz thing is something that I've integrated too. So I want to do that again this year and see just give you a little taste of where their IQ is at and if they're
Uh,
actually listening or not. So,
I got to pick your brain, coach, on what are some of the terminology or what are some of
oh
your key
man.
phrases that you put in that your guys need to know.
I mean, there was a couple guys who did like I think I put like V cut and they're like, Coach, I just don't know what kind of cut that is. Like, just stuff like that. But it's slip the screen, hedge the screen, um, yeah, like retreat dribble, skip pass, like just stuff that you would think is basic because we're obsessed with basketball as coaches, and that's all we do is watch and read and watch videos and things like that. But like you have to realize these kids have a whole nother life and other things going on, and so it'll be eye opening. I recommend doing it with your players and just seeing like where they're at, but. Even stuff you haven't talked about, like who really like does their research and so, yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Well, I mean, it's also, I think, a real cool practice too, as a coach to kind of reflect on like what is the terminology that means the most to me? Like, what are the words and what are the
Yeah.
things I need to like make sure my players understand? Because I think it's such a challenge as coaches because we have so much basketball knowledge and coaching knowledge is we know a lot about the game, but our players don't necessarily need to know all the things that we need to know. So to like go through
Right.
that exercise of breaking down and figuring out what are the terms, what are the phrases that I really need my players to know, I think that's like a good thought exercise so that coaches
Mhm.
can kind of filter it out and make sure that they're teaching the most essential things to their players.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious, Coach, about you talked about playing fast, and so of course, if you're going to play fast, you want to, get up and down. I know that transition is something that's really important. So as you were talking, I was kind of writing this down and thinking about it.
Mhm.
Even in transition, getting the ball moving and the way that you push the ball up the court and the way that you make good decisions on transition. What are your kind of like principles in transition to make sure that you're getting a good look and that you're making the most out of a transition opportunity on offense?
Yeah, I think filling the lanes is something, we say with our guys all the time. Like, fill the lane, get down the court. If the ball, if we secure a defensive rebound and now we're on offense, and if the ball is beating you down the court, you're doing something wrong. Like you should be spreading ahead. If your shooter gets to the corner, if you're a big, you're running to basket. If you're a trail guy, trail and just having the IQ of where to be and when to be. And, so like you said, pushing the pace and trying to fill the lanes. We do a lot of drills that reflect that. A lot of people do 11 man. I love it because
Mm,
you can really
continuous
practice
one,
your,
yeah.
yeah, you can really practice your sense of urgency and try to push the pace. And I tell them all the time, like the ball moves faster when you pass. Like I say, hey, who wants to race me while I pass the ball? You're gonna race the ball. I'm gonna pass full court, and you're gonna sprint. And it's like, okay, obviously the ball's moving faster when you pass it, not when you're dribbling up the floor. So, emphasizing that we want to get the ball out of our hands. The first thing that you do on a defensive rebound or a steal or a loose ball is your eyes are going up. You're looking up the floor. Because we want to have guys on the sides that are leaking out and kind of cutting towards the rim if there's nobody in front of them. Guys that are getting in the corner ready to shoot. To where if you're driving down the middle of the lane, you can kick it to a shooter, and you always have the trailer there. I think a lot of people run like the continuous full court running through like your transition looks, and so we do the same thing. We'll have five guys and kind of put them in different spots and it's just like, okay, very simple. Like the four is the trail, you swing it to the opposite wing and they shoot a three. And you put different guys in different spots. And so it's like, okay, I'm the point guard, but I get caught in this trailer spot during the game. Like I know exactly where the look's going to be. So different drills that try to push the pace. I think your passing drills help a lot with that. But like I said, just emphasizing the first thing you do when you catch the ball is you get your eyes up the floor. Because
Yeah.
nothing's more frustrating as a coach when the guy gets a defensive rebound around four other people and they just put their head down and start dribbling. So catch the ball, or, get your eyes up the floor, find your teammates. If nothing's there, we'll pull it out and run something. But we always want to be attacking in transition. So just because you didn't get a shot on one side of the floor, keep reversing the ball, get the defense one step behind, and you might have something there. If the defense fully recovers, we'll pull it out, we'll call something, we'll run something, but never stop attacking. Never stop trying to find the open guy.
And with everything that you said, I think, something that's super important to, just kind of remind people listening, and I'm sure you can speak to this, coach, is that execution on transition. It's not something that is easy. It's not something that your guys know right away. It's something that has to be a continual emphasis because making
Mm-hmm.
those reads and being able to, like you even said, catch the ball and look and all those things, like it's something that has to be an explicit focus in what you're doing in your practice planning. Otherwise, and you've seen it and I've seen it, we've seen a lot of transitions go really wonky and really sideways really quick because it just wasn't, emphasized or maybe practiced or drilled enough. And I can just kind of tell by how you answered that question that's something that's you're really working on and making sure that your guys know how to get out and transition and make the right decision.
Yeah, like we're not the fastest, we're not the most athletic guys. We have some size, but we want to get the ball out and transition by passing the ball and getting on the floor. And I try to tell our guys all the time, like you need to play to our advantages. So if you have our 6'7" center running the floor, like let's get him the ball going basket to basket. We have a guy who's hot from three, like he's sprinting down the floor and getting set up. So just that situational awareness, also comes in huge there. Just guys understanding when to push. We talk about this all the time, when to
Hmm.
push and, when to pull it out. So,
When to pull it out, yeah.
um, yeah, so we try to drill that too.
Do you find whether it's within your program coach or within some of the teams that you see or in club circuit or otherwise, is there kind of a epidemic of over dribbling? Do you see the ball like getting stuck too much? I'm just curious about what you kind of see with in terms of isolation or the ball sticking in one place. How big of an issue is that in what you see in your area?
I mean, obviously, I think that the AAU game is a completely different game. You play by a different set of rules. Two 20-minute halves is a huge difference between 4 quarters, sorry.
Hmm.
The game is stopping a lot more in 4 quarters. You lose a lot of momentum. If you get a lead in a 20-minute half, it's hard to maintain it for that long. And so I think that really like it's a completely different game almost. And so obviously travel basketball, it's a little less organized, but I'm not blaming anybody. A lot of times like those guys aren't practicing, they're just showing up and playing and they're just doing what they've been taught to do or they're doing what they're best at. And so you never want to be mad at somebody for using their strengths. But I think definitely in this area, like I'm 27. When I got the job here, like there's a lot of guys who are way better basketball coaches than me and have been doing it for a lot longer, and they run better sets than I do and things like that. And so I think when I got here and got immersed in like kind of this area, I learned a lot from the guys who I was competing against and just watching other teams play and things like that. The ball moves really well. And we've had some really good players come out of this area, but I think it's the same case all over the country. High school ball is a little bit more organized, and your travel ball is a little bit more showcasing, skills and athleticism. And there's nothing wrong with that at all because I mean, you need both at the end of the day from a player. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like the, thing that you kind of accept, I guess, at a certain point when you, especially when you have guys who are, at the AAU or the club level, are playing multiple games on a weekend, or they're, probably, whether they say it or not, right, playing to be seen and playing for exposure. The way that they're going
Right.
to attack that sort of situation and go after that situation is probably different than the way they're going to play in a high school situation where maybe they're going to be potentially, right, a little bit more team focused or play, a
Mhm.
little bit more. I don't know if intelligently is the right word, but they're not, playing with the explicit focus of, hey, I want to get noticed and make sure that these scouts or whoever it is that's out there is going to see me. It's
Right.
it's like you said, right? It's a little bit different.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also a couple more questions, Coach, before I hit our concluding statement. A couple more things I was kind of just thinking about. Is there any sort of teaching point or things that you emphasize with your guys about how to either set screens or cut or all of those little, I would say minute, but very important, but like those
Mhm.
little small details? Are there things that you're making sure that you're telling your guys? Are there certain ways that you want to be seeing guys cut or see guys set screens? I know you talked about V cuts earlier. I'm just curious
Mhm.
about what are those like points of refinement that those little things are getting done the way that you want them to.
Yeah, I mean, if we're isolating an action, we're going to show them exactly how we want it done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I want your foot right here on the elbow. You're going to set the screen, seal, take a step, and then kind of push off and go to the rim with your leading hand. Like, we are going to show them exactly how we want it done. Because when you run sets, it's geared towards beating the defense. And so if the guy turns the wrong way after he sets a screen, like everything's screwed up. If he doesn't come all the way down to the block before popping out and catching the ball, like his guys are ready to steal it. So I think those minute details are extremely important, and um, we talk about it all the time. Attention to detail, ATD is what we say to our guys, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of just fill in their head with that. Like, hey, we run a passing drill, jump stop, reverse pivot, dribble, handoff, and sometimes you'll have guys kind of walk through and they're not jump stopping all the way. And it's like, no, like you'll get called for a travel for that during the game. Like everything needs to be, we need to find a competitive advantage in anything that we can do. So the other team's getting called for moving screens and we're not, then so be it. So I think working on those little things and just cleaning up everything and try to check every box and be as prepared as possible. And just preach that, attention to detail. So.
Is that attention to detail mantra? Is that something that you've always kept as a coach? Is that something that you've adapted, or is that new to your coaching philosophy? How long has that been a staple to your, coaching portfolio, so to speak?
When I was my first year as head coach, I was saying it so much. I'm like, there's gotta like be a shorter way. And I'm like ATD, ATD. And so now that they understand what it means, but I was just preaching attention to detail so much, and um, at that my first year at the beginning of the year, and I'm like, gotta find out a cool way to say this. I don't wanna, everybody has like acronyms and things like that in their program, and so that's one of ours, I guess.
Oh, no, no. I mean, but it's great when you, like we kind of talked about earlier, when you have something that like your players understand like what that means, right? I feel like if you say
Yeah.
that to your guys, they know exactly like what you're referring to or like what that means. It's like an instant like reaction to that sort of phrase. I'm curious also a couple more things here, coach, that kind of like have come to mind. Obviously, space super important, getting the ball moving on offense. You don't want the ball to stick, but are there situations where you tell a guy like, hey, like this is a matchup that you gotta like dominate, you gotta take advantage of, or whether it's in the post or whether it's one on one. How do you kind of balance wanting the ball in general to move, but also with telling your guys like, hey, this is a situation where, you got to go to work here. Like you have an obvious advantage and
Mhm.
and you can afford to be a little bit selfish. What is that sort of conversation like?
Yeah, I mean, basketball's a game of runs, right? And I
Yep.
think different, situations call for different types of coaching. And so at the beginning of the game, when it's, we're only a few shots in and we're running a couple sets, it's going to look completely different than fourth quarter, 2 minutes left, one possession game. Um, so we have an advantage that, they haven't had an answer for. Like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and try to keep exploiting that. And I'll be straight up with the guys on, if we call timeout or something, saying, hey, like they're having a really difficult time guarding him when he's getting downhill off that pick and roll. Right now, I just want to spread it out, run that high ball screen, and you guys be ready to shoot or exchange on the sides and let him try to get to work and get to the rim. And those guys understand that because they go after each other every day in practice. And so they know, who's good at what. And, they want to see their teammate. We talk about it all the time. Like if you guys, you share the ball and you buy in, then everybody's going to eat. And so they know like, hey, tonight like might be his turn. I'm going to do my part to make sure that, the team wins. Next game, it might be my part. So I think just again, just stressing that with your guys, but just being real with them and not trying to kind of sneak around it. Just be straight up and say, hey, like we're trying to exploit this matchup. Um, you know, as a varsity basketball is awesome because you obviously have a lot of film and you can scout and things like that. And so when we're going over stuff, it's like, hey, the matchup, the guy we want to attack tonight, 32, he can't really move his feet very well. He plays with his hands a lot. We want to get him in foul trouble. And so the guys will understand that, different games call for different points of emphasis. And, it's like stress that, be honest with them before the game. And, as long as they understand that you're doing what's best for the team and you want the team to win, then, I don't think it should be a problem. Everybody should be on the same page.
But even with that, right? Like your guys have to trust one another and be like, all right, I trust my teammate that they're going to be able to,
Mhm.
win that matchup. They're going to be able to take advantage of that. And even
Right.
those conversations where you can say that to a guy and the teammates understand, that this is going to be something good for them, that's big on team building and the way that you kind of make sure that your guys come together because if you don't do that work beforehand, right, your guys may not be like, but I don't know if he actually can do it. I don't know if he's going to be able to
Right.
win that matchup. So I,
Yep.
I I get the sense from the way that you kind of answer that question, right? That like you really make sure that the team chemistry is good and the team bonding is good, so that if you have that conversation about, hey, this is a really good opportunity potentially for this one player, their teammates are going to buy into that.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So one more question, Coach, for it our concluding segment that I was kind of thinking about, and that is from your experience, what are the things that you've seen that like kill ball movement? What are the things that you see as a coach that are not getting the ball moving or not allowing the ball moving? What are those, kind of ball movement killers that you see that you kind of identify and you kind of notice right away and have to correct, or you see it and you're like, ooh, like this is something that we can't get away with for too often. What do you kind of see as those kind of ball movement killers, so to speak.
I mean, everybody calls it zero dribble or useless dribble, but it drives me nuts when we're running some sort of motion and a guy catches, the first thing he does is put the ball on the floor. And, when we're supposed to be coming right off our screen, and the difference between him taking that dribble and picking the ball back up to make that pass, now that guy's not open versus where if he would have just caught it and triple threat or ripped through, that guy's open for a shot. So it's just, it drives me absolutely insane. When we run in the summertime, we play games to 7, try to play really quick games, and we count. So like a point for a defensive stop, and then ones and twos, and charges 2 points. And they know like if a guy's taking a useless dribble and it's happened more than once, like I'll blow a whistle and boom, turnover, the team's going back down the other way. So um, just trying to take that because I think a lot of times it's um, because they could be kind of overwhelmed. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, hey, at least, well, if I'm dribbling the ball, I have freedom. You know what I mean? I can at least go somewhere with this if I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do, if this guy's not open or whatever. So it just goes back to trusting the process, making sure that you are the most prepared that you can be. Because if you're running an offense and a guy knows for a fact his teammate's going to be on the wing and exactly how much time it takes and where he wants the ball, then they're not going to hesitate with not taking that dribble and then just making that pass. So that is the one thing that kills it every single time is catching the ball, taking a dribble, and picking it right back up, and not at least trying to create space with the dribble or make a move trying to get to the rim or anything. So we hate that as coaches and seeing that, so we try to get that out of our bad habits. But um, I think there's not really um, you can't go wrong if you're playing hard. That's another thing that we
Mhm.
talk about a lot too. And so, you're never going to be mad at a guy for catching and wanting to rip and move the ball as quick as he possibly can. And so, just trying to preach to those guys that like as long as you're sprinting and you're going 100% to try to get to your spot and do your job, then the rest is going to work itself out. So,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
those things are huge. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing that, Coach. I want to make sure I got your insight on that. All right, Coach,
Mhm.
to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So we'll start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
So I think just goes back to being the most prepared and double checking everything. And, um, confidence is in preparation, right? And so tell these guys all the time, like your confidence comes from the work that you put in. Um, and so when I was a freshman coach at Springfield High School, and it was a freshman standalone game. So I was the only freshman coach for that game. Took the team there, and granted, I'm like 22, 21. I was still a young pup, but took the team there, unpacked the jerseys, and I'm missing 2 pairs of shorts. And I call the head coach, call in, and I'm like, hey, I know you got things to deal with or whatever, but I'm out here 25 minutes away and I'm missing 2 pairs of shorts. And he's like, okay, I guess you got to tell 2 kids they're not playing tonight. I'm like, okay, so let's make sure this never happens again. Luckily, he actually brought the shorts up. The kids ended up being able to play, but to this day, like I still have anxiety about packing a bag for a game, and I don't let anybody else do it. And I had a checklist, and I'm like, extra pair of shorts, extra jersey, because I'll make sure that never happens again. So I try to make a good lesson out of it and just be the most prepared that I possibly can be.
It's so funny those things that like stick with us, right? It's one of those things where like like you said, right? Throughout your coaching career, that's something you'll never like forget again, right?
Definitely not. No.
No, that's fantastic. To wrap up, Coach, last thing I give every guest is what I like to call a 60-second soapbox. You can go over 60 seconds. I just like to put a
Mhm.
fun catchphrase to things, but I like to use this kind of as a opportunity for you to get out like a final thought, a closing message, a closing idea, something that you want to leave the listeners with. You can take this, any direction that you want, basketball or coaching or otherwise. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm just gonna give the floor to you and let you take it from here.
Awesome. Well, you know, I didn't really expect. I always wanted to be a head coach. I didn't think it would happen when I was 24, going on 25. But um, just goes back to always be prepared because you never know when that moment's going to happen, and never take anything for granted either. And so I think saw a video the other day of a kid who his goal was to be top 100 in high school, and he ends up as the 100th player in the class. And he's like, well, if I had set my goal for 50, then maybe I would have been top 50 instead of top 100. And so I just, never think that anything is out of reach. And if you put the work in and bet on yourself and do the right things and stay humble and realize that, I kind of think that I'll be 70, 80 years old, still trying to go to clinics and still trying to watch college
Yeah.
practices, other high school practices, and just that realizing that you don't know everything, because I think it's very easy to get like that, and I've definitely got like that myself. But just staying humble and keep learning because the game's going to keep changing, whether we like it or not. And so you have to keep up with it, or it's going to leave you behind. So I think as long as you stay humble and you keep learning, use your resources, and keep a close circle of other coaches, then you'll be fine as a coach.
Fantastic. Coach Davis, I really appreciate you coming on here, talking about offense, talking about your program, talking about the things that you like to play. Love the attention to detail stuff and some of those finer points that you brought up as well. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully, Coach, it's a great season coming up. Hopefully things go well and you're getting the ball moving, getting out there, playing with pace, playing well, and things go great. So appreciate it again. Thank you for coming on and sharing all your insight with us.
Thank you for having me, man. It was awesome. I really enjoyed the talk. So good luck to you as well this year.
Much appreciated. And much appreciated all of you listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.